Bloomberg's reported that there's not going to be an annual Call of Duty release in 2023. The Treyarch game's going to be delayed until 2024, and we're going to get the sequel to Warzone as well as some other unannounced free-to-play game. I've seen people getting super excited over this news, but in this video I'm going to explain why I don't think this is such good news after all. First of all, this is obviously terrible news for Zombies fans. Call of Duty Vanguard Zombies mode has been an absolute dismal failure. I think the fact that they've added a new map and it's still terrible kind of cements in a lot of people's minds that this isn't going to get any better over the course of this year, and Infinity Ward games tend not to have zombies modes in them. So that means we might be waiting until 2024, November of 2024, before we get a proper zombies mode. That's like a year and a half away, more than a year and a half away. So that's awful for zombies creators and zombies fans who just want something new and fresh. Obviously there is a possibility that this new unannounced free-to-play game might be something to do with zombies, but I think that's fairly unlikely. It'd be awesome if there was some kind of massive like Master Chief Collection but for zombies. That would be insanely good. I'd be super happy and super behind that. But I think it's really unlikely. I think the unannounced free-to-play thing could be some sort of mobile-related thing, or maybe a version of Call of Duty Online getting released in the West. Now, the reason given for delaying Treyarch's game has apparently been the disappointing sales of Vanguard. Vanguard has apparently sold like a third less than Black Ops Cold War did over the same time period, so Activision are worried that they're just releasing games too quickly. It's important to note that this is nothing to do with Microsoft. This is all completely independent from the Microsoft deal. It isn't like Microsoft have come in and decided to change things up or anything like that. Now, this is where I think people have started making a mistake. I've seen some people online talking about this as if Activision are saying, well, Vanguard wasn't good enough, it needed more development time, so we're going to have a bigger space between games to make sure the games are ready when they launch. I'm pretty sure that's not what they're saying. They're saying, when they say we're releasing Call of Duty games too quickly, that these games are cannibalizing their own sales. So let's explain what I mean by that. Think about the sales over time for every Call of Duty game. There's obviously a huge spike at launch in October or November from all of those pre-orders and the die-hard fans who are going to buy it day one or in that first weekend. The people who know that there's a new Call of Duty coming, the people that are following the releases and everything like that. There's a huge spike in sales in that first weekend. Then sales continue to be high over the holiday season because people give it as gifts, and all of those casual players, the people who just play Call of Duty sometimes with their friends, notice that there's a new game coming out, notice that their friends have a new game, and they go and pick it up too. Then, like any other game, the sales drop steadily over time. Now, unlike other games, the drop-off in sales isn't that bad for Call of Duty. Call of Duty sales remain strong across the entire year. So it's January now, so we're a few months away from the launch of Vanguard, which, remember, was meant to be one of the most disappointing games in terms of sales for a while. Vanguard is still the second best-selling game of January, according to the NPDs. So it's trailing Pokemon Arceus, but bear in mind Pokemon Arceus came out a lot later than Vanguard did, and Pokemon is like the biggest media franchise of all time. But the fact that Vanguard is still the second best-selling game just goes to show how strongly these games sell. In fact, Black Ops Cold War is still 20th on the list. So the last Call of Duty is still hanging on there, doing well in the NPDs. These games are still selling incredibly well. I know you'll see loads of memes of people saying like, oh, COD's dead. It's nothing like that. Like, these are some of the best selling games in the world. So whenever a new Call of Duty game comes out, because they come out every single year, the previous one is still selling strong. But now there's this new game that comes out and people are going to buy that instead of the previous one. Like, people are going to go in the shops, especially more casual players, and just ask for whatever the newest Call of Duty is. If they're maybe looking to get back into Call of Duty with their friends, they're going to get the one that their friends are playing, not the previous one. So they're actually eating into their own sales. They're competing against their own product. This is made even worse by Warzone, because there's lots of people, and I know lots of my friends, who don't buy the annual Call of Duty releases anymore when they used to buy it every year, just because they find themselves playing Warzone all the time. So they just think like, well, what's the point of buying the annual releases? What's the point of spending all that money when I can just keep playing Warzone for free? Especially with people getting the Warzone battle passes and things like that, people are starting to spend some of the money that they might have earmarked for like video games on Warzone. So that's another way that Activision are essentially competing with themselves. So if Warzone 2 is going to release in March of 2023, and I'm just guessing at that, that's pure speculation based on the idea that the first Warzone came out in March of 2020, it makes sense that they'd probably try and keep the sales of Modern Warfare 2022 going for an extra year. And then they could also be making money off Warzone 2, battle passes and microtransactions, and importantly, they don't have to invest in releasing a whole new title. I know they tend to use the same engines and stuff like that, but every time they release a new Call of Duty, there's so much much work that has to go into it, from recording new voice lines, doing all new art, setting up new systems, all of the advertising and the marketing and everything like that. If you're not releasing a game every year, you can save on a huge number of those costs. So back to this idea that I've seen online all over the place, that now Activision are going to spend an extra year and extra resources on each individual Call of Duty game, making them even better, but with the trade-off of just not releasing one every year. I think what's going to happen instead is that the studios will be basically making the same amount of games, and they'll have roughly the same amount of time and the same amount of resources spent on them. But instead, in the years after their launch, they'll probably do a bit more support with other studios, which is something we've seen loads lately. I think on the next Call of Duty game there's 11 studios working on it, and they'll be working on seasonal content. So think about how this year, even though it's Sledgehammer's year for a game, Treyarch have been working on the zombies mode, and they've been working on the ranked play for multiplayer. Similarly, something like Warzone, sometimes it's Raven working on it, sometimes it's Infinity Ward working on it, but then when you look at the events that we've had, some of those have been created by High Moon Studios, some of them have been created by Beanox. So it isn't as simple as saying like, oh well, Warzone is just Raven, Black Ops is always going to be Treyarch, Modern Warfare is always going to be Infinity Ward. Instead, all of these studios have other things that they need to be working on. Often at the same time, they'll have different teams within the studios working on different aspects of different games. I also think instead of just like doubling the amount of time these studios have to work on the games, they might remove Sledgehammer as a studio. The Sledgehammer games have traditionally underperformed. They've traditionally been the ones that people have been less excited about. If they just removed Sledgehammer out of the equation, but then had a Call of Duty game every other year, that would mean Infinity Ward would have 4 years to work on a game, and then Treyarch would have 4 years. Or more likely, Infinity Ward would have a year or two to support their game that they've just released, and then 2 or 3 years to work on the next game, and then Treyarch would do the same. Again, there would be teams within the studios. Some would be doing support for the previous title, while some would be working on the next one. I wouldn't even be surprised if this was just the end of Call of Duty games being released, in the way that they're being released now at least, with maybe Treyarch's 2024 game being something very different to what we're used to. Subscription models have clearly been more profitable for gaming companies over the last few years. There's much less investment needed in terms of building new games from scratch, and far more return with monthly fees through things like battle passes or subscriptions or just popular microtransactions. Just look at the massive successes of games like Fortnite, Genshin Impact, World of Warcraft, even Destiny 2, which has just released the Witch Queen expansion. They haven't had to release a new game for an incredibly long time because they can just keep on adding new content, adding new features, adding new events, rotating things around in the games they already have, so they're lowering investment while getting a much higher return. I've made some other videos on how I think Call of Duty is probably going to adopt this model eventually, and this could be the first step. They could see how it goes with a year with no premium releases in 2023, but more free-to-play content than ever, so more stuff coming out for Modern Warfare, more stuff coming out for Warzone, more stuff coming out for COD Mobile and whatever this other free-to-play game is. I wouldn't even be surprised to see a subscription option come out alongside Modern Warfare 2022, so they could say to people, hey, if you want, you can spend £60 to just buy this new game outright and then buy the battle passes the same way you have been so far, or you can pay us £10 a month, £15 a month, and you'll get every battle pass, you'll get early access to something like Warzone 2, and then maybe a set amount of COD points every month. That would make sense to me, and then if that does really well, maybe they would just abandon the sort of £60 price tag games every year. A really positive thing that could come out of all this that I haven't heard people talking about is the effect it could have on the developers. Even if they're not actually giving us more content, even if the games aren't necessarily going to be more polished or anything like that, it could just be a change in working conditions for developers. We've seen loads of talk in the news at all different types of gaming companies, including Activision, about things like crunch, about forced overtime, about things getting rushed and people being demanded to come into the office to try and fix things. If you've got more time, you can spread things out a little bit more, you can treat your developers better. So it might be that although us as fans, us as players might not see that much different in terms of the games, the developers might have a much better work-life balance, and things like 4-day working weeks and stuff like that might be made possible by a change like this. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? Are we going to see an increase in quality in the games? Are we going to see an increase in the amount of content within the releases that we do get? Like, is Treyarch's 2024 game going to be remarkably different because it gets an extra year? Or do you think, like I do, that this is much more about sales, this is much more about maybe moving to a subscription model, moving to a live service model instead, and that actually the games aren't going to change that much? I'd be really interested to know what everyone thinks. Let me know if you've spotted any errors in my thinking through all of this, and if you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn those notifications on.